Okay, so as I said, thank you very much for joining with me today for today's session. For the benefits of those people who aren't aware of Axis Planets, we are a training management software house based in Lancaster, up in the northwest of the UK. We have traded since 2001. We have a footprint of clients stretching across the UK, Europe, America, and further afield. And we help training companies process more training whilst reducing administration. So if you have any interest in learning a little bit more about Axis Planets and potentially how we can help your training business, please feel free to reach out to me via email, via telephone, or indeed via social media. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So before we get started with today's session, I just want to give you a little bit of background on the source of the 4 challenges that we've identified today. And that is from our 2018 benchmark training industry survey, which we run every year. And essentially that survey is a pulse check of the industry in terms of what's going on. And we invite training professionals from a myriad of different sectors and different organizations to take part in that. And essentially we've identified 4 challenges facing the training business in 2019. And essentially, if you can tackle these 4 challenges, there's absolutely no reason why 2019 can't be your most profitable or most successful year to date. And those 4 challenges are currently on screen. So they are establishing learning delivery methods that your learners want, staying ahead in a competitive marketplace, how to do more with less resource, and how to drive down increasing costs. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at each of one of these challenges one by one and a little bit more detail. So the first one that we're going to look at today is establishing learning delivery methods that your learners want. And from the training industry survey, we have found that the majority of training companies plan to increase their focus on self-service learning in the next 12 months, moving away from the traditional face-to-face classroom-based courses. And in order to tackle that challenge, what we really need to do is to understand what's causing that shift in the marketplace, what's causing that shift in focus away from traditional learning and development methods to a more self-service delivery option. And we've identified a few key reasons for that. Now, the first key issue that I want to talk about today is millennials. As I'm sure we've all come across over the last few years, Generation X, Generation Z, and now we are on to millennials joining the workforce. And just to illustrate the impact that millennials will have on training, they will, by 2020, millennials will make up 50% of the workforce. 90% of those millennials use smartphones. And 71% of millennials who recently took part in a recent poll advised us that that mobile learning or self-service learning resonates with them much more than traditional learning and development activities. So it should be no surprise that with those people joining the workforce and being more likely to uptake in training, that the focus needs to move away from methods that aren't resonating with them in order to be successful, in order to be profitable. But more generally, we're also seeing a general shift in consumer behavior. So it's not just millennials who are driving that change. It is actually sort of as we sort of find ourselves in the age of Amazon, or the Amazon age, if you will, with instant access to consumer products online, instant access and instant gratification from purchases, overnight delivery, instant confirmation of bookings, instant confirmation of purchases. And just to illustrate what I mean by that in terms of the sort of general shift towards more self-service products and more self-service services, 91% of 16 to 75-year-olds who took part in a Deloitte survey had actually accessed a smartphone that day. So you can see that it's not just those millennials that are causing that shift, but actually there's a wider sort of shift in the way in which we consume products and consume services, and it's much more directed towards mobile devices. By 2020, the majority of people within the marketplace will actually be owning more than one mobile device. Actually, the likelihood is that we'll own 3 mobile devices, be it a mobile phone, a tablet, what have you. So we can see again that there needs to be that shift in the way in which we package up our products because of that change. And actually, the final big driver for that shift, we believe, is this whenever, wherever approach to employment. Now we're seeing more and more the rise of the gig economy, with the companies like Deliveroo, Uber, Airbnb entering the marketplace and giving people the option to work whenever and wherever they please. But more generally, we're seeing that trend go across, transcend industries, because we've seen actually in 2018 the mobile workflows for those remote workers has actually doubled in size over the last 12 months. And I'm sure you may well have come across a very recent story with PwC actually encouraging their new starters to actually work when they want, to choose when they want. So if we're saying that Monday to Friday 9 till 5 approach doesn't work for our employment, then obviously why does that work for our training courses? And we should be seeing a shift towards more, an uptake in more self-service learning. So one question I'd want to ask everybody at this point is, with these shifts, we're seeing this shift over the next 12 months, and indeed more and more in the future. Do we actually understand who our ideal learner is now? Because if we're seeing all these shifts and we're seeing new people enter the workforce all the time, do we understand as an organization who we are targeting in terms of who we want to be selling courses to? And if you don't, there's some really simple steps that you can take in order to do that. And the first and foremost, if you haven't already done this, this is a really easy and powerful way to create a profitable business, and that is to create your ideal customer persona. So that is essentially what that ideal customer looks like. Now, in the main, that is done through focus groups, inviting people in to have a conversation with you, one-to-one interviews with your clients, and indeed via surveys. And essentially what that persona is designed to do is to build up an idea of what resonates with that learner, what resonates with your customer, what keywords resonates with them, what industry terms interest them, what are their professional interests, what are their professional pain points, what do they need training on, what do they feel that they need to improve on, and are there any general trends within the industry in which you operate within that are impacting your ideal learners. That might be an update to legislation, a different approach, or a new scientific discovery in terms of learning. So, and not to forget the general questions of geography. Where is that learner based? What department do they operate in? What company do they belong to? What's their job role? What management level do they operate at? Now, if you ask these questions, you can then put together a much better picture of who your ideal learner is. So once you have that persona, the next thing that we need to do in order to tackle this challenge of delivery methods is to understand our USP, our unique selling point. Why do your learners choose you? And by creating this persona, by creating this ideal persona, you're essentially putting yourself in your learner's shoes. You're understanding what their motivations are, what their interests are, and that allows you to understand exactly why they choose you. So the first step is to identify your learner, identify your ideal persona, and retarget that USP to ensure that your methods, your message is resonating with that learner in more detail. And that's what I want to bring us on to my next question for everybody, and that is, have your learning delivery methods evolved? Now, what I'm talking about here is I'm not talking about throwing out everything that you're doing currently. It's not the end of face-to-face training. But what we're saying is that if our unique learner, if our ideal learner is evolving, then obviously the way in which we market our products to them, and indeed the way in which we deliver our products, also needs to evolve with that. And that is one of the most important things that you can do in 2019 is identify what it is that your learners want from you, and then identify whether there are any gaps within your service offering, and indeed more widely within the industry in which you work. Are you doing something that your competitors aren't doing? Are you filling a gap that they aren't? Or are they, vice versa, they are doing something that you're not? So you need to identify the gaps within your service offering and indeed within the industry in which you operate. Now, just to illustrate that it's not the end of face-to-face training, and I certainly don't want anyone to come away from today's session thinking that, and that is there's an organization which you might have come across before called Find Courses, who help training organizations, training providers market their courses online. And they also actually do an annual report, of which they've produced too. Now, in their latest one, in their 2018 report, they actually identified something that I found very interesting. And that is actually, as you move up the seniority of management, as you move into middle management and higher management, you actually see they actually see more value actually in the face-to-face sessions, in the delivery of those sessions by another human, or indeed by coaching, on the job coaching. So it's only those entry level, those millennials who are entering the marketplace, who are more interested in that self-service approach, and it is those higher level managers who are more interested in that face-to-face. So in order to tackle that first issue, to become more profitable in 2019, we want to identify our ideal customer, create that ideal customer persona, and we'll actually be sending out a resource pack which will include some points and tips on how to create that persona. Once we've done that, we should understand exactly what resonates with them, what the keywords they're interested in, what their interests are, what their pain points are, and that enables us to refocus that USP, understand exactly why people are choosing us. Next step is to identify any gaps within our market. Now that we've identified our learner, we've identified our unique selling point, we can now identify the gaps based on those, and indeed gaps within the marketplace more generally. And you're going to hear me say this word more and more as we go through today's sessions. Once we've moved through those 3 steps, we can then formulate a plan to ensure we put in place any steps in order to achieve that unique selling point and plug those gaps. Do we need to invest in software? Do we need to change our processes? And that is where that planning is most important. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the second challenge, and that is staying ahead in a competitive marketplace. As I'm sure you're all aware, the training industry is becoming more and more competitive year on year, more and more training organizations entering the marketplace. And the biggest challenge here, in order of staying ahead of that competition, we have identified from our 2018 training industry survey that 70% of training companies are neglecting digital lead generation tools. And this is by far and the most important challenge to any organization, because this is where you can find a huge amount of value in terms of making your organization more profitable, and that is by using these digital lead generation tools. And I want to start this section by looking at a pie chart, and this comes directly from our 2018 report. And this is, we ask people to identify what is their most valuable method of marketing. And as you can see here, by far and the most, referrals and reputation are the highest and most effective forms of marketing, and that will never change. Social proof, word of mouth, whatever you want to call it, is the most powerful form of marketing you can possibly get. And just to illustrate that, the lifetime value of referral customers is 16% higher than non-referral. So we can see there that there's a huge amount of value in that form of marketing. But the issue that we have is if we're getting all these great reviews, and we're getting this great feedback from our clients, but we're not utilizing search engine optimization or Google Ads or digital leads tools, then how are we putting that? How are we leveraging that social proof, that all of this great feedback that we're getting? We're not putting it in front of that ideal learner, that ideal customer that we've just created. We need to put this content in front of them, and that is where search engine optimization and Google Ads really come into its forefront. And to supplement your referrals and reputation, you can start to look at things like referral schemes, where you can actively ask your client base to give you referrals to another client by offering them a simple reason to do that, be it some money off the next course, some sort of reward for doing so, and that can really help increase the number of referrals and reviews that you get. So in terms of using SEO, there are a few really simple tweaks that you can make to get real value out of search engines. And I just want to move on to the next slide and just illustrate some really key stats when it comes to embracing digital technology and embracing search engine optimization. As you can see, 90% of all traffic originates from search engines. So you can see the power of search engines in terms of driving traffic to your websites and giving people visibility over exactly what it is that you do. 75% of people do not scroll past page one. There's a really famous joke within the marketing industry, and that is, if you want to hide a dead body, put it on the second page of a Google search result, because most people will not move past that first page. So you can see that if you're not visible on that first page, you are potentially missing out on a huge amount of revenue from that source. And just to illustrate the power of reviews, 88% of people will trust an online review in the same way they will a referral from someone that they know face to face. And there are loads and loads of websites out there that you can use: Trustpilot, FIFO, CourseCheck, Find Courses. These products are all designed to help you harness the power of those reviews and really leverage that social proof. So what I want to do now is I just want to give you a few key pointers when it comes to optimizing your website, because that's the first step that we need to do in terms of addressing this, staying competitive in the marketplace. The first thing that we want to do is we want to optimize your web page for SEO, and there's a few really simple tweaks that you can make to do this, and that is to do things like create page titles that include keywords. And because we've already created our ideal customer persona, we should be really aware of exactly what keywords we need to do to resonate with the customers that we're looking to capture. You can look at entering into some additional meta tags onto your website. You can start to think about strategic search phrases and placing them on your pages. And you can also develop site maps specifically for search engines such as Google and Bing and Yahoo and what have you. Now, if you do that, if you make those few tweaks, that should help increase the likelihood of you hitting that first page. But the important thing is to essentially maintain that visibility, and that is the next step that we need to do. We need to maintain visibility. And how do we do that? It's really simple, really straightforward. In order to maintain visibility online, you need to produce content. The more content that you produce, the more fresh information that you can place onto your website, making use of blogs, making use of case studies, reviews, endorsements. These are going to drive your success in terms of visibility. So once we've optimized our search engine, once we've increased our visibility to ensure that we maintain our position on that first screen, on that first page of results, we can then really start to leverage the power of our social proof. And that is the three most important steps in terms of staying ahead in a competitive marketplace. And here's a really, really interesting statistic for you. And this is a really powerful way to measure your current optimization, your current visibility. Nearly one third of all search results are location-based queries. So if I'm a training organization, and for example, if I'm a Prince2 training organization, and I'm based in Manchester, there's a really simple test that you can do for yourself. When you get back to your desk, go on that website, or go onto Google, type in Prince2 training provider Manchester. Are you on that first page? Because that will give you a really clear understanding of whether you are optimized and whether your visibility is good. And if it is, then great. And if it isn't, then hopefully you've got some pointers today to actually look at how you can increase that visibility. And if you'd like some additional content, some additional pointers on this, there's loads of great content on our Everest website which we had speakers from HubSpot come and talk to us about inbound marketing, which is where you're going to leverage the power of content. And we also had Fat Media, and there's a great talker there, and that's all about strategic search phrases and meta tags. So there's really good, really great content there. But the important thing to remember is this is intrinsically linked to that first step. We need to understand who our customer is, what resonates with them before we can optimize our website and increase our visibility. So what I want to move on to next, the next area, the next challenge that we want to look at today, and that is how to do more with less. So again, from our 2018 training industry survey, the average training business that we spoke to is spending 26 hours on course administration per week, which is an incredible amount of time to be spending administrating your business. And there are a few ways in which we can help you improve that. Certainly software like Access Planet is designed to automate and streamline as many of those administrative processes as possible. But there are a few other ways in which you can improve your efficiency in terms of reducing the amount of time it takes to administer your business. Now, the first thing that you need to do in order to do that is to essentially understand your processes. And again, another question that I have for each and every one of you is, do you understand your ideal learner journey? From their first interaction, be it them submitting an inquiry, all the way through to the way in which we nurture that customer after they've completed the course with us, do we understand what that journey looks like? And if we don't, then the first step in order to do more with less is to map that process out. And just to give you a pointer, here's one that I made earlier, a little bit like Blue Peter. As you can see, really straightforward, really standard type of learner journey through from a website inquiry received all the way through to a follow-up email. And this essentially allows us to standardize the approach for every single client. So every time someone makes an inquiry, we follow each of these steps. So even if we're not automating, we can still standardize the approach. And that means that whether you're a customer that spends £1 million with us, or a customer that only spends £100 with us, you get the same level of service. You're adding value to your customer's business, to their experience every step of the way through standardization. Now, the next step in this process is to start to look at which of these processes we can automate. And just to illustrate what Access Planet can do in terms of automating this process, these are the types of steps within this process that we would look to automate. Now, I know what you might be thinking, oh, how do you decide what's the criteria for understanding which processes can be automated? And that's really simple, and you don't need to look at starting to automate really complex processes. What we're looking at here is quick wins, low hanging fruit. What are the simple processes that we can look to automate to help save us time? And I'm going to give you 3 pointers, three points of criteria, 3 pieces of criteria that you should be looking at in terms of processes to automate. And they are, in the main, manual data entry. Are you spending hour after hour manually entering data into a spreadsheet in order to get value out of that information? For example, are you using paper-based feedback forms? If you're using paper-based feedback forms, in order to get the value out of the information that your clients are giving you from that needs to be entered into a system in order for us to pull out some value from it. The second criteria for automation is repeatable processes. Are we day in, day out running through the same process time after time? And is that a bottleneck? Is that time consuming for us? And there's a really simple one for this, and that is, how many emails are we currently sending manually? Are we sending booking confirmations manually? Are we sending joining instructions manually? Are certificates going out after the course manually? Are we following up with clients manually? They are very simple, repeatable processes which can be automated. And again, that is where there's real value to your client in that. Nothing's going to fall between the cracks. No email's going to be you're not going to forget to send an email. You're not going to miss a client off. And once you've automated that process, you can then look to optimize it in terms of what types of communication do we want to send? Do we want to start building complex workflows that will identify a different learner journey from our standard process? But once we've hit that low-hanging fruit, we can then concentrate on those optimization points. And the third and final criteria point is processes that have a low margin for error. They are where you do not want a human making a mistake And a really simple, good example of this is invoicing. If we are manually creating invoices within a finance package, within a system, then there is a very small margin of error. If we put a decimal place in the wrong place, that could have a huge impact on our profitability, or indeed on our reputation in terms of having to go back to that client to advise them that we've made a mistake in the way in which we've charged that cost to that client. So that is how we do more with less. We map out our processes, we identify where the bottlenecks are, where the low-hanging fruit, where the quick wins live, and then we put in place a plan to help automate those processes, or indeed streamline those processes to ensure that we do more with less, but also, and most importantly, we also start to add value within that journey in terms of a standard approach to the way in which we deal with our clients. So let's have a look at the next key challenge for the training industry, and that is driving down increasing costs. And what we mean by this is, again, from our training industry survey, over a fifth of the businesses that we spoke to said that they were concerned with a lack of business oversight. And that is a huge way in which you can start to look at increasing profitability. There are three ways to increase profitability. We can sell more. So by identifying our ideal customer, creating that persona, by optimizing our website, by increasing our visibility, by leveraging our social proof, we should be able to increase our sales. We should be able to sell more. But if we can't do that, or in addition to that, we can look to increase our margin, or indeed we can look to cut our costs. But the biggest issue that we have is if you don't understand where your cost drivers are, if you don't understand what's costing you money, how are we supposed to start cutting costs? Next, insight-driven companies grow 8 times faster compared to ones that aren't insight-driven, and that's really simple because they understand exactly where the cost of the business are, but they also understand where the value in their service offering lives. So if we understand that our training courses are well received, where is the cost benefit to that value? Is that down to, for example, the venue that we're using? So if I were to change my venue from a Hilton to a travel lodge, would that impact the value of my training? Potentially it would, but most likely it wouldn't. So that is potentially a cost saving for us. Additionally, if you are not harnessing the power of feedback and surveys, how do you understand where the value? How do you understand why that customer is choosing you? And that is where we come in with that USP. We need to understand exactly where our customers see our value to understand whether there is a cost-benefit analysis to be done against that. And 29% of revenue is lost due to inefficiencies. So if we start to report more on the viability of our courses, if we start to report more on the popularity of our courses, then we will understand exactly where those costs lie within the business, and we can then start to look at preventative action. We can start to look at moving costs away from the business to improve profitability. And what I want to ask everybody is, if you know this, then great. But I day in, day out, I ask the people that I speak to tell me, what is your most popular course? Now, I could probably say that everybody sat in this webinar today could tell me which course is most popular, which one do you sell the most of. But I would hazard a guess that most of you don't understand in relation to that whether that is your most popular course. And that is where that cost value reporting is most important. We need to understand where our sales are coming from, but also where our costs are coming from. And this is the most important message for this section, and that is that this is a balancing act. We want to identify where the costs of the business live, but what we do not want to do is in any way sacrifice value against those costs. So if we know that the value lives within that Hilton hotel, that is what our customers want, then obviously we don't want to reduce that cost because it adversely affects the value that we offer our clients. So we want to balance the cost with the value that we offer. Once we've done that, we can then look to reduce those costs, preventative action, by gathering feedback and understanding where the value is. We can then reduce those unnecessary costs. And first and finally, obviously, what we need to do in order to to identify that is we need to come up with a plan. Do we need to start looking at bringing in software to enable us to report day in, day out on the cost of the business, to understand the value of the feedback that we're capturing? Do we need to change? Do we need to start looking at changing trainers? Do we need to start looking at changing venues? But hopefully you get a picture that by identifying where the value is within your business, you can then start to look at reducing unnecessary costs. So they are the 4 challenges that we've looked at today. So just to summarize, we want to look at understanding our clients in more detail, identify our unique selling point, identify our ideal customer, understand exactly what delivery methods they're interested in, and then start to plug the gaps within our service offering in relation to that customer and indeed their interests. Once we've identified that, we then need to start utilizing digital marketing lead generation tools to help optimize our website, increase our visibility, to enable us to really leverage the power of the referrals and reviews that we're capturing from our clients. Then we need to start looking at identifying ways in which we can reduce costs. We need to understand our processes. We need to understand exactly which processes we can automate or streamline, and that's when we start looking at those low-hanging fruit, those quick wins, those repeatable processes, those low margin of error processes that we can help automate. And finally, we need to be more business insight driven. If we want to grow faster, if we want to be more profitable, we need to understand the viability of our business, where the cost value benefit comes from in the courses that we offer. So that is all I've got to say today. But don't worry, that's not the end of today's session. What I want to do now is I want to open up the floor to any questions that you have. So if you'd like to ask any questions, if you haven't already done so, please feel free to hit the chat box and I'll answer off any of those questions that have been placed in there currently. So just to cover off some of the quick ones that we've got in here. So you want to learn more about customer personas? That's absolutely great. Can we recommend some resources? Don't worry, I'll be sending out a reading list after this webinar. Everyone will get a copy, and that has got some really good points on how to build a persona, what sort of questions you want to ask in there. I've got a question here. What is the URL of that company again? Yeah, that's right. It is Fine Courses. The company's called Fine Courses. Again, that report, I'll add that to our reading list as well, so you can have visibility over that as well. There's another question here. I want to provide more online learning to alongside my face-to-face courses. Where do you recommend I store them? Well, there's loads of options there, really. You can look at standalone LMSs or virtual learning environments. There's plenty of those out in the marketplace. Best option is to use something that is connected. So, for example, we have our particular software does have its own LMS built within it, which you can use to host and launch SCORM compliant training, or indeed you can also run webinars, virtual learning from that portal as well. But there's plenty of other ones out there. There's Moodle Free, which is a free open source tool that you can use to build your own LMS. Another question we've got here, which review sites are best for training companies? There's absolutely loads of them out there. I'm not going to say any are better than others, but in the main, I would recommend people like FIFO, Trustpilot, CourseCheck, Fine Courses. I believe they do a bit of promotion as well. But there's loads of them out there. Google itself has its own sort of company rating. So there's a whole host of them out there for you. Which other processes do training businesses commonly automate? It's a very good question, and to be perfectly honest, it's absolutely down to the organization in question. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's where the value is in a human intervention. So we're not saying that you should automate absolutely every process, but it's understanding where the bottlenecks are. So if you are spending hundreds of man hours a year or a week sending manual emails, then that is a very simple process to automate. But if you have, for example, if you do predominantly in-house courses and every single one of your clients is completely different and they all have different requirements for different courses, then that might potentially require some manual intervention. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. If you'd like to understand, if you'd like me to advise you on the sort of processes that you can automate, then feel free to contact me and we can arrange a process mapping workshop, and you can take me through your processes, and I'll certainly give you some tips on how to automate them or indeed how to streamline them. Another question here, what are the best reports / information I should be using to help grow my training business? Again, there's loads of metrics that you can use to determine the effectiveness of your training, but I would tell you first and foremost, if you want to get value out of the data that you hold, it's all about contacting your clients, speaking to them. Speak to your biggest client. You know, what value do they? Where's the value at? And you can then start to measure their feedback more closely. But I would certainly look at things like viability tracking, so understanding your resource requirements. You know, how many external trainers do you use? What's the cost of the business for them? You can then, if you're using a survey tool, you can then cross-reference the effectiveness of that training with the sessions that those trainers are delivering for you. If they're getting great feedback, then that's great. That's where that cost value benefit analysis comes in handy. If they're costing you a lot of money but their results aren't perhaps as good as other trainers, then potentially that cost value analysis would tell you to actually preventative action. Maybe the next time we run that course, let's use something that's more cost effective because we're not seeing the value in that. So I would say, in the main, you want to be looking at the cost of the business alongside the value that those courses offer. Hi Joe, your users could use Teachable or thinkific.com. These are great sites where users can create and host their own courses. Great, thanks for that, Mark. I really appreciate that comment there. One final question. How can you build just one persona when you offer many different types of courses aimed at people at different levels, etc.? You're right. You're completely right, Lily. You can build as many personas as you want. So as I mentioned, as you move up the level of management, they become more interested in things like one-to-one coaching, the external trainers coming in and offering the face-to-face training. So you're absolutely right, and there's absolutely no problem with having multiple personas, and then essentially you can tag your clients, you can tag your accounts, people within those with that persona, and then that enables you to then target what process they go on, because you don't necessarily just have to have one learner journey. If you offer in-house courses as well as public-facing courses, then obviously they need to have slightly different journeys. So you can build as many personas as you like, and in actual fact, you probably bet the more you have, the better, because it means that you're targeting more individuals. But that also then leads on to enable you to target what content for which client. So obviously your senior leadership management will want to see different content to your administrators, and that enables you to then target them in more detail. So that's about all I'm going to cover today. I cannot stress enough, if anyone would like any additional information from me, my contact details are on screen. Drop me an email, give me a call, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions, or if you'd like to learn more about Axis Planet and the way in which we can help you process more training whilst reducing administration, then please do contact me or indeed the solutions team at Axis Planet. I hope you found today's session useful. As I've mentioned, everyone will get a copy of our resource pack, and indeed a copy of today's session. So if you want to pass it on to your colleagues and shout about how great it is, and get them to come and have a view of the webinar, I'll get that out to you as quickly as I can. Thanks very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.